Oh, wowee! I don't think I've ever seen such a staunch defence of a franchise. Oh, g'day! You must be another Tolkien and or Peter Jackson refugee. I take it you've come to avoid the fighting on the surface. Either that, or you've drifted here on the currents of fate, as was foretold. Or perhaps you're here to support the re-uploading of this video, given that Amazon took it upon themselves to manually review and then partially block the previous upload. Regardless, welcome to the Sheltered Harbour, my friend. It's okay, Amazon can't hurt you here. Let me put on some soothing non-Howard Shore copyrighted music. Now show me on the Gandalf doll where this show touched you. Oh dear. And then they called you patently evil and fascist adjacent as well? And all because you expressed concerns about the show? That seems like a little bit of projection on Amazon's behalf, if you ask me. But it has been a very long road and an unexpected journey to get here, so I would be remiss if we didn't recap the road so far. Jimmy, hit it.
Breathe the free air again, my friend.
My proud Aussie and slightly bogan tendencies aside, I can't play that music without getting struck, so we'll leave it there. The year is 2017. Well, not at the moment, but in the terms of the story it is. And it's been several moons since our last cinematic hit out with the Lord of the Rings franchise, being the third film in the Hobbit trilogy, The Battle of the Five Armies. The Hobbit trilogy as it stands is probably a great example of corporate greed outstretching creative prowess. However, that is not the point of this video. Actually, no, it is, now that I think about it, but not in terms of the Hobbit trilogy. But we'll get to that. Game of Thrones is entering into its 7th season, and it is all the rage right now. So naturally, other companies are looking to compete with HBO and bring their own fantasy show to the forefront. With Netflix announcing in May 2017 that they would be adapting the Witcher series, it became clear to Amazon that they needed a fantasy series that could compete with the likes of HBO's Game of Thrones and The Witcher. Bezos, having more money than God and being a massive Tolkien fan, evidently leant towards the rights for The Lord of the Rings. On the 3rd of November 2017, following a massive bidding war, Amazon announced that it had purchased the rights to The Lord of the Rings for $250 million, beating out Netflix.
You will never get this, you will never get this, la 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 la.
From what I can understand, it came down to the pitch to the Tolkien estate from both companies. It seemed Netflix wanted to do either a remake of the Jackson trilogy or some spin-offs thereof, whereas Amazon was keen to focus on the greater Tolkien picture and pick some stories from other ages. Regardless, Amazon scored the rights to Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. These are not to be confused with the rights owned by Warner Brothers and New Line Cinemas for the films that Peter Jackson made. On a completely unrelated note, Roy Prince, the head of Amazon Studios, has now been ousted for sexual harassment claims. Why is this unrelated piece of information important to the story? Well, in an article published in Variety magazine on the 9th of September 2017, Prince stated that Game of Thrones was as influential for television as Jaws and Star Wars was for films in the 1970s. As a result, Jeff Bezos was desperate to get Amazon their very own Game of Thrones equivalent. It would be a massive coincidence for Amazon to purchase the rights to The Lord of the Rings in November 2017 and believe that the head of Amazon Studios, Prince, didn't have anything to do with it. Regardless of what he got up to during his personal hours, evidently the man had a sense for what would sell. That drama aside, part of the deal for purchasing The Lord of the Rings was that something needed to go into production within the next 2 years. No doubt this was the work of the Tolkien estate's lawyers, making sure that other companies weren't being kept waiting in the event that they weren't going to get a return of investment. However, I'm not privy to the conversations that went on in the back rooms of the Tolkien estate with these streaming companies, so we'll pour a little bit of salt on that and call it conjecture. What is a fact, however, is that Jennifer Salk took up the reins of Amazon Studios in February of 2018. The mantle of responsibility then fell to her to produce a quote-unquote mega hit for Jeffrey Bezos. On the 11th of June 2018, Salk spoke with The Hollywood Reporter. In that interview, she spoke of her 3 goals now that she was head of Amazon Studios. The first goal was to improve the culture at Amazon Studios, noting that the previous top lieutenants had been ousted for sexual harassment claims. The second goal was to make Amazon Studios a destination location for upcoming filmmakers. And the third goal was to start producing quality shows quickly. All of which are noble goals on the surface. However, Salk's appointment to the head of Amazon Studios in February of 2018 should not be considered a coincidence, noting what happened in the year before.
In October 2017, the hashtag #MeToo spread across the globe. What began as a Hollywood sexual assault scandal sparked a public reckoning around the world.
Funnily enough, the same time that Prince and others were removed from Amazon Studios. Without drifting into murky waters, guys, the Me Too movement has been both a gift and a curse for modern entertainment. And you need look no further than the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial that took place this year. With the advent of social media, careers could be killed with a single hashtag, regardless of if there was any proof to back it up or not. This isn't a random tangent, guys. Jennifer Salk's appointment to the head of Amazon Studios would have massive flow-on effects and repercussions for their upcoming Lord of the Rings series. In her own words, Jennifer Salk was appointed because she celebrates women and diversity.
That's kind of how I am. I like to build a team around me that's very diverse. I like to be challenged to think about things differently. So we're a very open pathway toward diversity in general. But, we want to really be part of the amplification of women's voices in our business right now.
While those are excellent qualities to have in your personal life, when you're the head of a studio, you need to be able to park your subjectivity for the greater good of whatever it is that you're producing. In this case, entertainment that's attached to one of the greatest names in the Western canon and has a massive pre-established fan base with impossibly high expectations. And given that Tolkien's works were converted into pretty much every language under the sun, and the only book to outsell them was the Bible, I would argue that they already appeal to a very, very diverse audience.
You have my sword.
Y cuenta con mi arco.
Era mia ashe.
We'll call that a little bit of foreshadowing, but before we move on, another important footnote was that Christopher Tolkien stood down as the director of the Tolkien estate on the 31st of August 2017. In his place, he appointed his nephew, Simon Tolkien. For those of you not in the know, Christopher was a massive guardian and protector of his father's life's work, to the point where he took it upon himself to finish and publish several of his father's unfinished works, including The Silmarillion and A History of Middle-earth Volume 12. So it's fair to say that Christopher Tolkien would have had the best understanding of the Second Age of anybody alive at that point. By mid-year 2018, rumours were circulating that Peter Jackson was being headhunted for the project. This was met with mixed reactions. Some were celebrating the possibility of Jackson's return, while others remained wary due to the mixed reception of the Hobbit trilogy.
If you're, like me, not a very great Tolkien admirer, you have no great allegiance to the integrity of the original, then this hugely overinflated act of fan love is kind of daft, but amiable and kind of likeable. I don't have a problem with its length as such.
But the only thing more powerful than the One Ring is Hollywood's desire to milk a popular franchise dry. So 10 years later, we got the announcement that Peter Jackson was back again to direct the film adaptation of Tolkien's novel The Hobbit, a prequel to The Lord of the Rings. And it was going to be a trilogy. Now I'll be honest with you here, I had misgivings about this one right off the bat. It really didn't feel like there was enough story to justify an entire trilogy, but truly, nothing could have prepared me for the shitstorm that was coming.
In the interim, Amazon announced that the showrunners for the series would be J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. Again, this was met with mixed reactions, noting that the two men had very few film credits to their names, and certainly nothing as big as The Lord of the Rings. It wasn't long before pockets of the internet began to show concern at the appointment of these two lads, given that they were closely affiliated with J.J. Abrams, whose Star Trek movies had had mixed reactions from longtime fans.
I've already gone over all of the red flags, and to this very moment, the most concerning should be the showrunners. J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, whose only experience is writing a horrifically bad Star Trek movie and being connected to the horrifically bad destroyer of franchises bad reboot.
Mixed reactions was something that Amazon did not need when they were trying to build a mega franchise off the back of The Lord of the Rings. As a result, Amazon continued their pursuit of Peter Jackson. However, by the month of December, it became clear that Jackson was not going to be involved in the project.
Peter Jackson is weighing in on Amazon's The Lord of the Rings TV series, saying they ghosted him. Jackson told the Hollywood Reporter's Awards Chatter podcast, "They asked me if I wanted to be involved, and I said that's an impossible question to answer without seeing a script. So they said as soon as we get the first couple scripts, we'll send them to you. And the scripts never showed up. That's the last thing I heard, which is fine. No complaints at all."
Again, with a sprinkle of salt and a wee bit of conjecture, it wouldn't be difficult to imagine Amazon starting to worry about not having Peter Jackson's name associated with their Lord of the Rings project. It wasn't long before they pursued other names associated with Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings that would ease the concerns of fans. On the 7th of March 2019, the first image of the Lord of the Rings from Amazon was released on Twitter. The image was credited to well-renowned Tolkien artist John Howe, a man who had not only done art that inspired Peter Jackson to make the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but had also worked closely as a concept artist on the trilogy itself. He was aided by well-renowned Tolkien scholar Tom Shippey, who is widely considered the foremost expert on Tolkien literature.
You have a story about Tolkien inventing hobbits. There he is, marking his examination papers, which is extremely boring, and he turns over and he finds a blank sheet and he writes on it, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." And that's the start of the whole thing.
The first map was swiftly followed by a second map that revealed the island of Numenor. This had a very positive effect on the fandom, who were excited to see Numenor realised on the big screen. The excitement quickly gave way to more concern with the appointment of Game of Thrones writer Brian Cogman. This, coupled with the narrative that Amazon was chasing their own Game of Thrones series, led fans to believe that Middle-earth was about to get the Game of Thrones treatment.
So it begins.
However, the rollercoaster proceeded to go up and down with the announcement in September that the show would be filming in New Zealand, much like the Peter Jackson trilogy. Word from Amazon that their search for a cast was going well, and it looked like the show was beginning to take shape. In November of 2019, Amazon announced that they had greenlit a show for 2 seasons. This coincided with the popular rumour that the show had been pitched as a 5-season epic back in 2017. Following the Christmas break, Tolkien fans were met with some terrible, terrible news.
This is the end of the Lord of the Rings, the end of the last chapter.
On the 16th of January, Christopher Tolkien passed away. This was a devastating blow to longtime Tolkien fans, as Christopher was seen as the last best guardian of Tolkien's work. Although there was still a Stark in Winterfell with Simon Tolkien heading the estate, many began to fear what Amazon would do to the Lord of the Rings now that Christopher wasn't there to guide the process. These fears were amplified by the announcement of the cast on the 14th of January. People were quick to note how diverse Amazon had been with the casting of the characters of Middle-earth, some going as far as to cock an eyebrow at the casting of people of colour. For many Tolkien purists, it seemed Amazon had warped Tolkien's work to better reflect the world of today. However, skepticism would continue to grow with further announcements. Despite the far from ideal start to the year, filming commenced in New Zealand in March of 2020. Although that initial momentum was very short-lived. It seemed that the global pandemic that had been sweeping its way across the planet had finally found its way to Middle-earth. In an attempt to stop the spread throughout New Zealand, harsh lockdowns were put in place to minimise the risk of the spread. Amazon was quick to reassure people that production would continue and filming would be possible on sound stages.
Everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
While originally optimistic that the show would be released in 2021, with a global pandemic and other production problems, Amazon conceded that it was likely the show would be released in 2022. On the 9th of March, during the COVID hiatus, unsubstantiated rumours began to circulate that Amazon had let go their entire writing staff.
Amazon has let go of the entire writer's room for Lord of the Rings.
What?
Everyone's gone. Their plan is to bring in a whole new writing team.
Are you
for season 2?
Freaking kidding me?
Right now,
Are
as
you
we
kidding
speak
me?
today, as they film this, season 1 is on hiatus.
The through line being that they were focusing on a different direction for season 2. Normally unsubstantiated rumours like this wouldn't hold much weight. However, given that the OneRing.net had been almost exclusively reporting all relevant news on the show, like they'd done with the original trilogy, the rumours did seem to carry a little bit of weight. On the 16th of April, more bad news, as Tom Shippey was revealed to be no longer attached to the project. It's not clear whether Shippey stepped down of his own accord or he was asked to leave due to creative differences, but his departure from the project was a massive red flag for long-time Tolkien fans.
The Amazon series fired Tom Shippey. Is that true? Sorry, it's hard because I've talked to Tom, but I know that he would not want me to reveal most of the things that he told me, so I can't really comment on it. I will say it's not that simple. I don't think that that's exactly what happened like that. Like they just up and fired Tom Shippey. I'm pretty sure not what occurred there. Is he still involved? I don't believe so.
With the death of Christopher Tolkien and Tom Shippey stepping down, there was no longer a long-trusted Tolkien lore guardian attached to the project. So it's understandable that Tolkien fans might start to worry about what direction Amazon was going to take the series, noting that the two Tolkien guardians were no longer attached, and they didn't have any direct work to adapt.
There will be a time to grieve, but it is not now. War is coming.
Amazon once again was quick out of the gate to assure fans that they would be using other Tolkien scholars to assist with their creation.
Hi, my name is Corey Olson, the Tolkien Professor. I'm president of Signum University, and I've been doing a podcast on Tolkien called The Tolkien Professor for more than 10 years now.
On that note, a clear divide was starting to emerge between people who considered themselves Tolkien fans and casual fans.
You have fans of Tolkien who are not happy with the things that they're doing with the Rings of Power show, and on the flip side of that, you have these companies like IGN and fan sites like the OneRing.net who are completely shilling for Amazon right now.
In the months since the announcements of the cast, it seems that the seed of division had been growing. On the 24th of September, an article was published on the public medievalist site entitled Dear Tolkien Fans, Black People Exist. The article was reasonably topical given the year and the diverse casting of Amazon's Lord of the Rings series. Without diving too deeply into the article, there were some fundamental misunderstandings about Tolkien's work, particularly in regards to critical race theory. No popular franchise is immune from the Eye of Sauron that is postmodernist analysis. However, the Tolkien fandom will jealously defend Tolkien's works, particularly when they feel he's being misrepresented.
Despite what the gatekeepers might say, that does not mean I cannot call myself a fan if I want. Oh, you can call yourself a fan. You're just not a Tolkien fan. You're a Peter Jackson fan. I was and I am obsessed with these movies, and my love of the movies and their appendices made me read the books, and I fell in love with the books. I've read The Silmarillion, The Hobbit, and The Lord of the Rings every year since 2003. I love these books because I watched the films. That's what makes me a fan. There's nothing wrong with loving the films, but if that's the extent of your knowledge of the lore, I don't really think you can call yourself a Tolkien fan any more than listening to Bitches Brew and Headhunters makes you a jazz fan.
Thus began the era of the battle between the legacy Tolkien fan, the casual Lord of the Rings fan, and the postmodernist activist. The term gatekeeping was quickly weaponized against purists who argued for faithfulness in the adaptation of Tolkien's work, while purists argued that the Lord of the Rings was a timeless and diverse place already. Fans calling for consistency and accuracy to Tolkien on the extreme were labelled as white supremacists, while those calling for modernity and inclusion were called filthy casuals who did not belong. To throw fuel on what was quickly becoming an absolute toxic battleground, a casting call by Amazon revealed that they were searching for actors comfortable with nudity and had also hired an intimacy coordinator for the series. This appears to be the beginning of the mainstream pushback against Amazon's Lord of the Rings series, still yet unnamed. Up until this point, concern about the series had been localised to forums dedicated primarily to Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings, with the exception of the Twitter backlashes following the announcement of the main cast. But with this announcement, reactions from concern to outrage poured across most elements of social media. I'm not a gambling jellyfish, but I'm tipping this had something to do with the fact that everyone was locked inside due to a global pandemic and therefore had to focus their energies on something. Regardless, sometime between September and October, filming recommenced in New Zealand, with many fans now watching closely to make sure that Amazon didn't misstep with one of their most beloved franchises.
The great eye is ever watchful.
It seemed that this was one red flag too many. From the casting of diverse actors in place of Anglo-Saxon characters from Tolkien's work, to the rumours of possible nudity and sex scenes, to the perceived lack of experience of the showrunners, and the loss of Christopher Tolkien and Tom Shippey, it was too much. Multiple YouTube channels overnight seemed to be talking about Amazon's Lord of the Rings series and the concerns they had thereof. Additional cast members were announced on the 3rd of December, which included more diverse talent. More concern grew as it was revealed that a number of these actors had been cast as original characters who were not inherent to Tolkien's original works. The shadow of doubt over Amazon's Lord of the Rings series would continue to grow over the Christmas period before on the 12th of January, a synopsis of the series was released, stating officially that there would be a number of original characters set during Tolkien's Second Age. Questions from Tolkien purists were immediately raised as Amazon didn't have the rights to the Second Age officially, noting that they didn't have the rights to the Silmarillion or the Legendarium. More concerning still, without the foremost experts on the Second Age being Tom Shippey and Christopher Tolkien, how could Amazon possibly adapt the era faithfully? Noting that references to the Second Age in the appendices are without dialogue. Regardless, the synopsis could boil down to the fact that the series would be focusing on the forging of the Rings of Power, following a young Elrond and Galadriel, and of course, Sauron. Actually, I don't know if they'd revealed the specifics of characters at this point yet. I might be getting ahead of myself, but this is the year where the drama shifts up a gear. It wasn't long after the reveal of the synopsis that another announcement came that Amazon had purchased MGM Studios, thus giving them the rights to the Hobbit trilogy, at least the films thereof.
It's official. Amazon is acquiring MGM Holdings in a landmark mega deal in a bid to turbocharge its Prime membership offering and potentially mine intellectual property from MGM's franchises. Senior VP of Prime Video and Amazon Studios Mike Hopkins said, "The real financial value behind this deal is the treasure trove of IP and the deep catalog that we plan to reimagine and develop together with MGM's talented team."
This was just another reason for fans to be concerned, noting that now Amazon could literally use a Hobbit at any given point in the Second Age. Departures due to creative differences would continue, as Tom Budge announced on the 16th of March that he would be leaving the project as well.
Australian actor Tom Budge has left Amazon's Lord of the Rings. Announcing via his Instagram account, Budge wrote a lengthy diplomatic message. "It is with great sadness that I am writing to tell you I have departed Amazon's Lord of the Rings television series. Amazon has decided to go in another direction with the character I was portraying. I sincerely thank the extraordinary cast and crew for their love, support, and friendship over what has been a very difficult and unusual experience."
Budge was not the first key cast member to leave, with Will Poulter announcing in December of 2019 that he was leaving due to scheduling conflicts. With the departure of these two actors and the loss of Tom Shippey, coupled with the fact that the entire writing team had been let go, was not doing much to reassure even the most casual of Lord of the Rings fans that their franchise was in good hands. In early April, The Hollywood Reporter confirmed that the first season of the show would cost $465 million, well over all original projections and making it likely the most expensive television show of all time. On the 12th of May, Jennifer Salk, again via The Hollywood Reporter, stated that Amazon's Lord of the Rings show must work for a global audience. Now might be a good time to call back as to why Jennifer Salk was appointed the head of Amazon Studios in the first place. Appointed during the time of the #MeToo movement, waited for the death of Christopher Tolkien to fire the entire writing staff, and then pad the cast with diverse characters, most of whom would be original and not from the works of Tolkien.
Tell me, friend, when did Saruman the Wise abandon reason for madness?
Apologies for letting a little bit of my bias slip out before I'm done stating all the facts. However, I know of a certain statement that gets released in February of 2022 that will really drive all of this home, but I'm getting ahead of myself again. On the 9th of June, and seemingly unrelated to the release of Amazon's Lord of the Rings series, the Tolkien Society invites speakers and essayists to discuss Tolkien and diversity. Once again, Tolkien purists and even casual fans are taken aback by the discussion surrounding the Lord of the Rings, noting Amazon's project that's in the pipeline. Coupled with the fact that the head of Amazon Studios is very pro-diversity, once again it would seem a massive coincidence for these two events to coincide. In early July, the Tolkien Society meets and a number of essays are discussed, including
Gondor in Transition, a brief introduction to transgender realities in The Lord of the Rings.
Given that there had been very little to no news from Amazon in regards to the upcoming show, fans were quick to jump on these essays for anything that they could disseminate. Naturally, this symposium only caused further divisions in factions that were already surrounding this growing culture war.
Because the Tolkien Society has such conviction over these presentations that they lock the comments and hit the like-dislike ratio. The whole point of the seminar is to foster discussion between different interpretations of Tolkien's works, so you block the comments. That pretty much tells us that they know people won't like or agree with these presentations, so they're keeping anyone from discussing them.
Although at this point it seemed an uneasy truce was forming between the Tolkien purists and the Lord of the Rings casual fans, there seemed to be a growing fear amongst both parties that Amazon was about to approach the quote-unquote woke territory with their series. Given Jennifer Salk's proclivity for diversity and the appointment of a very diverse cast, and the fact that in the absence of any news human beings will assume the worst, it's not difficult to understand how they reached this conclusion.
What do you suppose that is?
Although it wasn't long until on the 1st of August we got our first official look at the upcoming series. The Lord of the Rings on Prime Twitter account released their first image of the show. Unfortunately, any goodwill from the general populace had long since been given away in favour of concern, noting that most of the comments on the tweet were, "Please be good." It seemed by this point even people that hadn't been following the drama associated with the series were starting to worry about what was coming. It's likely that this reaction from the quote-unquote normies was a reaction to the failings of Star Wars, Doctor Who, Star Trek, and the decline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Coupled with the fact that Tolkien's works had spanned multiple generations, and many considered his works to be above reproach, it's clear that the apprehension surrounding Amazon's Lord of the Rings series was quickly becoming a powder keg. In a perfect illustration of that point, the YouTube channel Smasher released a concept trailer on the 12th of August for the upcoming series.
The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were.
Tolkien and Peter Jackson fans from across the globe all responded in the same statement, albeit in different languages. Evil cannot create anything new, they can only corrupt and ruin what good forces have invented or made. J.R.R. Tolkien. The trailer approached ratio by fans, however this would not be their last word on the matter. On the 13th of October, following a period of relative silence from Amazon Studios, British actor Sir Lenny Hendry announces in an article that the upcoming series will be more diverse than the Peter Jackson trilogy. Once again, these comments are met by fans with great concern. It seems the through line from most people discussing this upcoming series is less about the source material and more about diversity. To add insult to injury, the filming for season 1 concludes, but not in New Zealand. Production had shifted to the UK post the COVID hiatus. Not only that, but apparently production will stay in the UK for seasons 2 and beyond. Like I needed another reason to tempt my bias on the situation. How could you abandon the Kiwis? Look at them.
It's enough to make a grown man cry, but not this man.
Oh, bugger it. My binational pride slipped out again. You're alright, New Zealand. Getting back on track, from August until about the new year, there was another period of relative silence from Amazon Studios. But of course, you're not watching this video because all the plans laid by Amazon went well. You're here because you know the shit hits the fan, and boy oh boy, what a year we have to come. On the 20th of January, Jeff Bezos revealed the title of the show via Twitter and the first teaser trailer. Henceforth, you shall be known as the Rings of Power. If there had been any doubt that the Lord of the Rings fandom were uniting against Amazon's Lord of the Rings series, this was it. Everyone from Tolkien purist to the most casual Peter Jackson fan let their feelings about this trailer be known in the most binary manner possible. But more than that, the comments in the trailer also reflected that the fans were very, very worried about what was coming downrange. The top comment on the trailer being very reflective of that.
What's a battle?
With the countdown well and truly on for Amazon's The Rings of Power, it wasn't long before the mainstream media started pushing out the promotional fluff pieces associated with the big budget series. On the 10th of February, Vanity Fair released their first look at the Rings of Power series article. The article included a number of still images of upcoming characters, as well as a brief synopsis and comments from the showrunners and producers.
Gentlemen, this is what we've been waiting for.
Remember how I was alluding to a comment about diversity and inclusivity that was going to tie all of these concerns together? Well, here it is from producer Lindsay Weber. It felt only natural to us that an adaptation of Tolkien's work would reflect what the world actually looks like. Tolkien is for everyone. His stories are about fictional races doing their best work when they leave the isolation of their own cultures and come together. For those of you unaware,
Tolkien's famous for disliking allegory and maintaining with great force in his foreword to The Lord of the Rings that this is not an allegory.
As for any inner meanings or message, it has in the intention for the author none. It is neither allegorical nor topical. I cordially dislike allegory and all its manifestations, and always have done so since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence.
I can't say objectively whether or not this was the one comment that was the biggest red flag of what was to come. However, for most people, this comment was of great concern, noting that Tolkien himself thoroughly despised allegory and was never about representing the world in which he currently lived. In fact, the most noteworthy predecessor to adapting Tolkien's work had gotten this very correct.
I think to apply modern political thinking on a story that is essentially 50 years old is a little bit inappropriate.
However, I am once again getting ahead of myself. On the 14th of February, the American Super Bowl trailer was released and once again was met with harsh comments. With each new trailer that was released, Amazon was facing increasing backlash from a fandom that was clearly not in the want of what they are about to give them, with the show still 7 months away from airing. A reminder that this is backlash like we'd never seen before. Not even in the Star Wars sequels had we seen this level of fandom rebellion. And the most fascinating part about all of it was it wasn't just the Western audience either. Even on the Super Bowl trailer, the quote attributed to Tolkien being that evil cannot create anything good was represented by multiple languages. If I was to extrapolate from information previously provided in this video, I would say that that had something to do with the fact that Tolkien's work had been translated into multiple languages across the globe. It appeared at this point that Jennifer Salk would indeed get her international audience. However, perhaps not in the way that she intended. In a bid to seemingly combat the backlash they were experiencing from their actual fans, on the 19th of February, Amazon released a special look at the upcoming series, featuring
Fellowship of Influencers, Chanel, Joel, and Kelsey.
Every time I was like, okay, take a breath, something new would happen, and it was
It's Middle Earth, there's never peace, right?
If like Sauron is hot, I feel like people will be like, I can fix him.
Middle Earth had like a club.
Yo, this tune is banging!
Awestruck, mystified, and starstruck.
Wow. The reaction to these super fans was absolutely brutal. So much so that Amazon delisted the video.
The UK and the American trailer have been ratioed with no end in sight, and Amazon has been unlisting videos, including this one.
It seems casual and Tolkien fans alike were united against this new threat, this new fake fan produced by Amazon. It's one thing to accuse a company of using bots to drum up excitement for an upcoming project, but the fact that Amazon were caught red-handed using fake fans, and not only that, using fake fans across multiple countries.
So, yeah, there's the castle. They're all identical. I don't just mean edited the same, I mean even down to the people in them. When you open a door you go through it, but these people don't. No, we're all gonna pause at the door. The UK group that you've already seen before. And this is the Italian crowd. I kind of feel like I'd have a great time with these people. Going over to the German crowd, each one of these has been filmed in its own little scene so that they could all time it perfectly, get the camera into the correct position.
Demonstrated to all parties that Amazon was worried about their upcoming series. However, by this stage it seemed the battle lines had already been drawn up, with a clear delineation of one side stating that anything that was created by Amazon was not reflective of Tolkien's work. It wasn't long until the usual suspects began producing articles about how the fandom needed to embrace change.
War. War never changes.
In a bid to quell the fan uprising against their Rings of Power series, it became clear in April that Amazon had been deleting comments from their various trailers across YouTube.
Comments are being deleted at time of recording. Lowest estimate, 28,000 comments are gone from the American trailer since Disbrew first reported on it.
This, coupled with the barrage of mainstream and access media articles stating that fans were toxic and review bombing the upcoming series, it was evident that fans would need to adjust their strategy if they were going to combat the Amazon juggernaut. On the 14th of July, Prime Video released their UK trailer for their Rings of Power series. The trailer was quickly ratioed, but it seems Tolkien fans had embraced a new weapon in their arsenal: parody. Instead of Tolkien quotes, trolls would say things like, "I thought it was amazing when Galadriel yelled, 'This is Sparta,' and kicked Sauron down a big hole." This trend continued into the month of July, where the San Diego Comic-Con trailer was met with a similar response. The trailer was once again quickly ratioed by fans. It seems, despite the massive resources that Amazon had available to them, they were getting smashed on every front. It was also becoming clear that the massive production of the Rings of Power had taken its toll on the producers.
The show was very hard to produce. But she did a really good job, and so did some other folks.
I had a lot of help.
How long have you been working on it?
I joined the project in 2018. Yeah.
We're at 4.5 years here. Lindsay, do you want to be a Numenorian so you can die because you're so sick of producing this show?
Not yet. Maybe season 3.
Who seemed more keen to talk about how the process was finally coming to an end rather than the fact that their show was about to air. Naturally, the panels were also ratioed online. In association with San Diego Comic-Con, Entertainment Weekly released a series of images from the show. Keen-eyed fans were quick to pick apart every single piece of detail in the pictures, including the ridiculous plastic fake-looking armour, and again confirming that there were dozens of original characters and half a dozen race-swapped characters as well. Running in parallel to these efforts by fans, the Access media had been targeting the works of Peter Jackson and Tolkien. But, much like Blitzkrieg in the Second World War, fans had grown wary of the "and that's a good thing" type articles. Following Comic-Con in the month of July, we got a look at some interviews with some of the actors in the upcoming series.
The fact that you are the first black woman to be a dwarf in Tolkien, the first woman to be a dwarf in Tolkien, what do we learn about woman dwarves that we didn't know through your portrayal?
Well, we learned that they exist.
Right there.
And thank you so much, Angelique, for noticing and acknowledging the fact that this is the first time that we see a woman and the first time that we see a black woman in this area and this world and these works of Tolkien.
Once again, the topic of conversation was less about the Lord of the Rings and the works of Tolkien itself, and more about how inclusive, diverse, and representational the upcoming series was going to be, including bringing a feminine energy to the cast, fighting urge to pause and zoom in.
Enhance. Enhance. Enhance.
By this point, the lead up to the premiere had been a perfect storm. Each and every trailer had been well and truly destroyed by fans and ratioed in place. The demonised Tolkien purists and casual Peter Jackson fans had done everything in their power to warn people of what was coming.
I was delighted when I got the job, but then the sort of seriousness of the fan base starts to set in. I spent a lot of time on the Reddit threads, for better or for worse.
Oh
no.
All that remained was the premiere itself. And then the show aired, and depending on your point of view, it either looked like this, or like this. While Amazon claimed over 25 million people tuned in to watch the premiere, they never revealed any actual watch data to support those numbers, with multiple sources claiming a dramatic drop-off between episodes, particularly between the first 2 episodes, which aired on the first night. On top of this, Amazon froze for 72 hours non-verified reviews on multiple review sites.
It's been nearly 5 full days since Amazon premiered the first 2 episodes of Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power on Prime Video. But still, Amazon is hiding from criticism. If you want to, you can click this and it goes down here. It says you can give a star review, but at the end of the day, you can't actually submit your review.
Including their own website and IMDb, which, funnily enough, is also owned by Amazon. It then wasn't long until multiple sources reported that Amazon was deleting one-star reviews.
Now, as you see, 11,962 global reviews, 3% of them are 1-star. It says 15,000 global reviews, 29% of them are 1-star. 29%. But the update tells us that they deleted thousands and thousands, and it's at a 3%.
But despite their attempts to control the narrative, the show had premiered and it was now out there in the wild. As irony and luck would have it, Game of Thrones would also release a prequel at the same time, House of the Dragon, which HBO was only too glad to boast about in terms of numbers and viewers.
According to HBO, House of the Dragon has averaged a massive 29 million viewers per episode since its August 21st premiere, higher than all but the final 2 seasons of Game of Thrones. The first night all-platform audience for House of the Dragon has hovered in the 9 to 9.5 million range over the course of its 10-episode season.
Considering how one show had everything, including the fandom, working against it from the start, and the other was coming off the back of the success of Peter Jackson, it's amazing how the numbers played out. Therefore, when Amazon chose to run silent after the initial announcement of 25 million viewers, it seemed even the least skeptical of people were asking questions about how many people actually watched their show. Regardless, on the 2nd of September, or the 1st, depending on your point of view, Amazon's Rings of Power aired to, you guessed it, mixed results.
About Rings of Power. It's so bad, bro.
I've watched 2 episodes of Rings of Power so far. This Lord of the Rings show might actually get people to appreciate The Hobbit more. So hey, keep an eye out for that as pendulums swing.
Lord of the Rings of Power largely succeeds by staying faithful to J.R.R. Tolkien's themes and tone. And when it reaches its climax in the 6th episode, it all comes together brilliantly, creating a strong successor to Peter Jackson's beloved Lord of the Rings trilogy. Yet, The Rings of Power also remembers it's the little moments of humor and character growth that really make Middle-earth come alive.
Okay, well, I don't think I can find anything that is remotely Tolkien in this. Galadriel's a completely different character. She's out for vengeance for her brother. Gil-galad and Elrond apparently are plotting against her in order to make her, to get her out of the way, right? She's no longer necessary here. Who needs Galadriel? She's only been hunting Sauron for hundreds of years.
Don't have a lot to say yet. I feel like I'm intrigued enough to keep watching, but I'm not on the hook, so to speak. Like when episode 3 comes out, I'm not going to rush to the TV to watch it. I can wait a few days.
Which is better, House of the Dragon or Rings of Power? Well, I haven't watched Rings of Power yet because I'm going to binge it. I don't want to watch them both at the same time. And House of the Dragon started first, so I was already taken, so I've got to wait. So I don't know.
The show looks expensive. The scale and spectacle are genuinely impressive, even in this blockbuster age of television. The production design is spectacular, and when it all hits, there's a sense of true majesty to the unfolding action that feels worthy of Peter Jackson.
Rings of Power was a total failure. Absolute. Everyone knows it, including the studio.
Of all the properties for Hollywood to reimagine and creatively and thematically butcher, Lord of the Rings is simply a step too far. And in my opinion, there is no one in Hollywood who could do Tolkien's work any justice.
The launch alone was everything Amazon had feared, well below expectation. Remember, in the words of Jennifer Salk, this show needed to work for a global audience, win awards, or track at #1 for at least 6 months. Naturally, in the wake of fan backlash, Amazon and the Access media were quick off the mark with attempts to deflect blame.
There's been a lot of racism. I'm gonna call it what it is. A lot of racism.
But unlike the claims of racism levelled at Star Wars fans in the lead up to the Kenobi series, these claims fell on deaf ears. For the first time on this scale, fans would not be silenced as Amazon, its actors and supporters levelled abuse at them. Attempts to galvanise the fandom behind old faces were met with scorn, once again proving that one does not simply antagonise their fanbase. As the weeks went by, more and more criticism was targeted at the show, but unlike other intellectual properties, even the Access media shifted their stance in order to save face. Without breaking down the entire series, please allow me to show you a brief montage of the calibre of failure we're dealing with here.
Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot? Because the stone sees only downward.
It's hard to say which way is up and which way is down. How am I to know which lights to follow?
You just follow your feet.
My hand is past feeling.
No. This place is so evil, our torches give off no warmth.
Gildor into the heart of Mount Doom, where the ring was forged, the one place it could be destroyed. Cast it into the fire! Destroy it!
Give off no warmth. So evil, no warmth.
What day was he here?
Oh, let it go, Knife Ears. The lot you lump us in with died off 1,000 years ago. When are you people gonna let the past go?
What do you mean, you people?
There's been a lot of racism.
I am simply wondering what manner of man would so readily abandon his companions to death.
One episode earlier.
Commander! Wait, no! We keep moving!
How far outside?
I'll rejoin you in the Regium.
You certain you know what you're doing?
Allow me a few days to work mine.
Hello! Hello! You have my pills! Hello! I'm cold and there are wolves after me.
But you have not seen what I have seen.
I have seen my share.
You have not seen what I have seen. Evil does not sleep, Elrond. It waits.
Oh, what'd you do that for? Because I'm evil. I can't help it. Sorry.
Dwarves under Peter Jackson.
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with an elf.
What about side by side with a friend?
I could do that.
Dwarves under Amazon.
And he's here to see my friend whom I've greatly missed.
Missed! You missed my wedding! The birth of my children, 2 of them! You cannot barge into my mountain and demand I welcome you with open arms. Enough with the quail sauce. Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
I must follow the passage the other direction.
You don't know what's down there.
That is the reason I'm massacred.
That's just maddeningly unhelpful.
The sea is always right! The sea is always right!
Well, that's even more than less than unhelpful.
Some called him a fool for believing it would grow in such darkness.
Where there is love, it is never truly dark.
His mother. What happened to her?
She drowned. The sea is always right.
I will cut it down!
I will take it. I will take it.
Looks very, similar.
There's a sweet smell on the air this way. When in doubt, Eleanor Brandyfoot. Always follow your nose.
Is that way?
He's remembered.
No. But the air doesn't smell so far around here. If in doubt and the end open, always follow your nose.
You're trash, Brock.
I don't speak Firefly. There is a tempest in me. It swept me to this island for a reason. And it will not be quelled by you, Regent.
Check your privilege, trash.
What's this about you can do using your Kevlar?
That Kevlar wasn't yours to lose! That was the property of this United States Marine Corps! Belonged to every Marine! Cause your failure to secure that hammock, you jeopardized every Marine serving today!
If even one of us makes it home, we can return in force. Sweep the enemy from these lands like salt from a table.
Salty.
I must be blind. This is no sigil. It is a map.
I'm the map. If there's a place you gotta get, I can get you there, I bet. I'm the map.
There are many ways to kill an orc. But for you, I will keep it strong and simple. Stab, twist, gut.
Knife goes in, guts come out. Knife goes in, guts come out.
Shady's back. Tell a friend.
Looks can be deceiving.
That's a woman?
Because I was inverted.
Bullshit.
What is that?
That's a pyroclastic cloud.
They can move at several hundred kilometers an hour and can be hot enough to kill in an instant.
Dead.
Really?
Yeah.
One plot armor later.
They just reveal the creation of Mordor by PowerPoint.
Like a corporate presentation. Star wipe.
So as you can see from our quarterly projections, we plan to sell 200 high-end units overlooking the plains of Gorgonath.
So, when all is said and done, what's the truth of it all? Was the backlash in the lead up to Amazon's The Rings of Power justified? Or, once again, was it the work of a toxic fandom of gatekeepers?
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
In my assessment, The Rings of Power is a lazy, superficial cash grab that borrows from better works, that plays at being highbrow fantasy, but in reality is a pseudo-intellectual sideshow that's more uncanny fanfiction than faithful adaptation. However, that is just my assessment, and if you liked it, more Rings of Power to you. However, I won't just float by silently, and you better be prepared to justify why you endorse a corporate ransacking of Tolkien's work. As you might have already guessed, I believe the fan response, for the most part, was highly justified, particularly in the latter piece when the studio went after their fans directly. Once again, and I'm hoping this will eventually go without saying, we do not tolerate racism on this channel, and if it did occur, I do not endorse it in any way, shape or form. However, we've learned in recent history that corporations in the entertainment industry are more than happy to virtue signal if it means they can protect their product from genuine criticism. While undoubtedly there were dickheads that targeted actors for their race or their beliefs, for the most part I believe the vast majority of criticism would have come from fans of Tolkien who were upset by Amazon's portrayal of his work. The Rings of Power is a perfect case study for what happens when the timeless collides with the topical. Adapting the work of one of the greatest authors in the modern era is not something to be taken lightly. Take for example the personnel behind each project and their ethos when it came to the creative process.
So where do I start? Peter has told me that he wants to make Lord of the Rings. How do I inspire in this young group of New Zealand designers and technicians the philosophies and the vision that will carry this film for 5 years and deliver it onto the world stage in a way that's worthy to the written literature of Tolkien? Gathering around us a like-minded group of young New Zealanders, I very much believed, as I do today, what I said to them then. If you couldn't rise to the highest level of enthusiasm, passion and professionalism and grasp this task as if it was the most important thing that you have ever taken on in your life, you weren't worthy of the task. We had been blessed with the opportunity to bring a piece of modern English folklore to the screen.
I gave a little speech to the design crew very early on, where this is a little bit weird, but
It was the only way I could really express myself. I said, look, we've been given the job of making the Lord of the Rings, but I want to, from this point on, I want to think that the Lord of the Rings is real, that it was actually history, that these events happened. And more than that, I want us to imagine that we've been lucky enough to be able to go on location and shoot our movie where the real events happened. Those characters did exist and they wore costumes, and I want the costumes to be totally accurate to what the real people wore. Hobbiton still exists. It's overgrown with weeds and it's been run down and neglected for the last 300 or 400 years, but we're going to go back in there and clean it up. We're the luckiest film crew in the world. We were able to shoot in the real locations that these real events actually took place in, and that was effectively my speech, to try to get everybody's head into what I actually sort of wanted in terms of a feeling of reality.
What made you mad enough to want
to... pure ignorance, sheer stupidity, and wild recklessness.
You know when you're standing in line for the roller coaster and you're like, okay, well, we're never going to actually get to the roller coaster because there's so many different people in line. And then you find yourself sitting on there, like, oh wait, we're on the roller coaster, now it's going up. And you're like, no, it's going to go down. That's a little bit like...
We're still going down.
Yeah, we're still going down.
The question is, when did you first encounter Tolkien?
Do you want to take that one, Lindsay?
And we felt like the Second Age is freaking awesome. And it's Tolkien's amazing untold story that is so iconic. With the story, struck us as one that could really live up to and match the grandeur of what we knew the canvas was going to be. Because it was going to be a 50-hour story for the beginning. So if we're going to tell 50 hours of story, we want to really make it worth it.
Just as fans and as viewers and lovers of Middle-earth and Tolkien, we didn't want to do like a side thing or a spin-off or the origin story of something else. Like, we wanted to find a huge Tolkienian mega epic. And Amazon were wonderfully crazy enough to say, yes, let's do that. And
really, guys, like, no BS, they have let us make the show we want to make.
So JD, my co-writer, and I, from the very beginning of this process, the rule was go back to the books. Go back to the books, go back to the books. And sometimes that's going for specific information, right? What color armor people wear in this part of the world. What were hobbits or a version of hobbits doing at this time in the world. But it's also about really trying to absorb into every cell of your body what is important to Tolkien. What are his themes? What were the messages that he was fascinated by? What are the emotional registers that his storytelling plays in? And then hopefully try to honor that.
There never was much hope.
So once again, going back to the books, we found all of these, incredible suggestions, and from a paragraph or two, a whole world sprang up, right? We thought about, what are the hobbits we know in the Third Age when the later books and films are set? Frodo and Bilbo and Sam, and what do you associate with them? Well, there's loyalty, bravery, courage, but they're also small and vulnerable, and thinking about, well, maybe where did that come from, and sort of doing like a cultural archaeology, and then finding details like the wheels on the carts the Harfoots carry around match the round doors that maybe one day they'll have at the Shire if they ever make it.
The great thing about Tolkien is that all the descriptions and of what you need to build are in the book. You don't actually have to wait for the script to finish, unlike you would on a normal movie.
Okay, if we know that is like this, what would this be like? And really, we saw ourselves as archaeologists in a way, like trying to dig up the fossils that Tolkien left there, rather than create anything new, if that makes sense.
I've always thought it was remarkable that Tolkien basically spent his entire life creating what he called the secondary world. He created the languages, he created the thousands of years of history. It's so rich and so detailed that nobody today that writes a piece of fiction is ever going to come close to the sheer wealth of information and detail. Of course, all of that makes it fiendishly difficult to adapt into any sort of movie.
How daunting is it to take on the material knowing how sacred it is to the legions of Lord of the Rings fans out there? What is the thing that has been most nerve-wracking about tackling?
I mean, all of it, but people do sort of ask us about this, and the honest to God truth is, there's no one who can put more pressure on us than ourselves, because this means so much to us. Getting this right means so much to us. We've been the fans who've been disappointed, maybe many times over, and we didn't want to disappoint you guys, and hopefully lots of other people.
And you know, that's a hard thing to live with and constantly feel like, oh my God, is it good enough? It's not good enough. It needs to be better. It needs to be better. It needs to be better. And that's what we've lived for 4.5 years. It's sort of nice to take a moment and actually like celebrate it here with you all. Thank you.
We are 2 or 3 years into the process. We're still getting together with our cast and doing stuff and the crew. And there's people that have been working on it for 5 or 6 years. It's become a lifestyle more than just a job. You know, and everybody has become friends. I mean, everybody that's worked on this film, cast and crew, just have that comfortable shorthand with each other. And it's now just become a really comfortable, friendly, wonderful group of people to be associated with.
As it turns out, you can't pay for passion and you cannot buy a fandom. We've seen modern entertainment companies split the fan base before, but never on this scale. The corporate execution of entertainment is the death of creativity, and fans can see when a studio has bought and paid for a project rather than living and breathing it. Because in this case, they've seen it all before. The original Lord of the Rings trilogy is timeless and damn near perfect, and that is the byproduct of every member of the production being passionate about the source material and the end product.
Everyone was dedicated to what they were doing, even if they weren't great Tolkien fans before they started working on the picture. They took it on board, they lived with it, they became part of Middle-earth.
Then, when the studio tried to repeat the magic with The Hobbit, not out of passion, but out of a desire to make more money, the fans saw right through it. That said, even the Hobbit trilogy shines in comparison to the Rings of Power due to the passion of those working on the project, particularly given that many of them had worked on the original trilogy.
It was a little bit like returning to summer camp. You know, so many of the people who were part of the first journey are part of this journey.
He's back. So now it's a slightly more well-oiled machine with the same charm and chaotic geniuses behind it.
Although the desire to create the Hobbit trilogy was born out of corporate greed, the execution was still that of passion and respect for the source material, even if it was shot at a ridiculous frame rate that made it look ludicrous. The Rings of Power is a perfect storm of too much creative freedom, a lack of care for the lore, inexperience, and a desire to make Lord of the Rings topical rather than timeless. The result of which killed the Rings of Power long before the first teaser trailer even dropped. In trying to appeal to a broader global audience, Amazon forgot what made the Lord of the Rings globally appealing in the first place.
It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow, even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going. Because they were holding on to something. There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
The Lord of the Rings is timeless and universal because it transcends modern ideology and individual bias to create a fundamentally human tale of courage, friendship, and sacrifice. That's what makes it appealing to a global audience, because it's fundamentally human. Because, as it turns out, despite the superficiality of skin colour or creed, some traits and themes speak to all humanity at a core level. The concepts of race, bigotry, and division are there in the source material, of course, present within the story, but they aren't the focal point. Tolkien's work painted a picture of a European mythology, long since lost to time. He loved the natural world and despised the growing industrial revolution. He personally hated allegory. However, you can certainly see these themes at play in his work, and likely more so in the Peter Jackson trilogy. Tolkien's depiction of the orcs, again, wasn't some postmodernist analysis of the racial other. It was a representation of how greed corrupts even the most fairest of beings. I'm not offering my own analysis here, guys. This is the words of the man himself.
You're obliged, any author I imagine is obliged to call on his stock, private stock.
Is this another word for what Freud would call the unconscious?
No.
No, I didn't think it was.
No, both. What is himself, both, no doubt, what he inherits, his unconscious, and what he has as part of his mental makeup and reading, his memory. But he may not have the object of revealing that, or lecturing to anybody, or even trying to put forward his view as a total one or a good one.
Let's avoid the word lecture for a moment, because it suggests a propagandist work, and I don't think anybody is really talking about that.
Well, they have been, so perhaps...
well, I'm not, and you're not, so let's not.
No, good.
In the case of the Professor's work, the elves, who humanity saw as ethereal and otherworldly, if even these angelic beings could be corrupted, what chance did the humans have? Tolkien was a professor of literature. When he used words, they had meaning. This wasn't some allegory about racial representation. It was setting the stakes for the story, that the One Ring and the darkness drawn to it would corrupt regardless. The creators of the Rings of Power focused on what divides the real world, rather than what unites a fantasy realm, and in so doing they sowed the seeds of division within their own fandom. Perhaps they too should have listened to the words of the man himself before inking their first draft.
Were to be remembered as the man who has made the Lord of the Rings, would you rather be remembered as a man who said something or as a man who has made something?
I don't think you can distinguish. The made thing, unless it says something, won't be remembered.
Thank you.
I personally cannot abide the fact that the showrunners were arrogant enough to say that their show, which would be reflective of the modern world, was the untold epic from Tolkien. Maybe there was a reason he didn't write it. Maybe his world and story were already so detailed and fleshed out that he didn't need others to come along and insert their own sensibilities into the equation.
Well, we didn't want to put any of our own, certainly in terms of the thematic material, we didn't want to put any of our own baggage. I mean, we had no interest in putting our messages into this movie, but we thought that we should honour Tolkien by putting his messages into it.
I am 98% sure, without any evidence of course, that this is why multiple actors and Tom Shippey left the project, because they could see the disaster looming like the fall of Numenor and were not willing to be associated with the desecration of Tolkien. So, where does the blame lie with this one? The inexperienced showrunners and the producer from Bad Robot, the Tolkien estate, and more directly Simon Tolkien and his disdain for Peter Jackson's work? Jennifer Salke, perhaps, as the head of Amazon Studios and her desire to push diversity and inclusivity at the cost of Tolkien's lore? Or Big Jeff Bezos himself for choosing the quick and easy path to a franchise? As easy as it would be to blame Bezos, I do not believe that he wished this series upon anyone, least of all himself.
In fact, one of my boys, I think, approaches the level of a Tolkien scholar. He knows so much about this universe. And after Amazon got involved in this project, my son came up to me one day, he looked me in the eyes, very sincerely, and he said, "Dad, please don't F this up."
From hearing him speak, he did strike me as a fan of the novels and the films. However, he is partially responsible and definitely somewhat to blame for allowing this to happen, given that money is the root of all evil. And if there was an opportunity to gatekeep this series at all, it fell well and truly with him. I wonder how he distracts himself from his failings. Moving down the chain of responsibility, it is alleged that it is Simon Tolkien who was the one who enjoyed J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay's pitch and approved the series.
But I think the thing with films is that they kind of have to exist in their own right. And my problem with the films was really that I think Jackson was kind of too faithful to the book. He kind of put too much into it, and so there was too much going on. I would have liked more character and perhaps following his own course.
Noting that Simon wasn't a fan of Peter Jackson's work, surely a fair portion of the blame can be levelled in his direction. Let's remember that it wasn't long after Christopher Tolkien passed away that his descendants began to pilfer his family coffers. But then again, approving something is not quite the same as writing it yourself. So maybe it is the fault of the inexperienced showrunners JD Payne and Patrick McKay. By their own admission, they were in way over their heads and had no idea how to handle a franchise on this scale. Just because they were massive fans of Tolkien and wanted to do a good job doesn't necessarily translate to the final product. While negligent shouldn't be confused with inexperience, there's no doubt that their inexperience cost this show a great deal. In the hands of a more capable showrunner with experience working with large franchises, perhaps the series could have been something fantastic. I still don't understand how you give a show with this level of budget and importance to two inexperienced showrunners, but anyway. However, when all is said and done, I believe Jennifer Salk is the Dark Lord of this story. After all, it was she who was given direction from Bezos to create a mega hit, and whether or not it was her misunderstanding of what made Tolkien's work universal, or that she deliberately inserted her own ideals to debauch the professor's writings, the fact that she can be directly tied to all parties appointed for the project is damning enough evidence for me to cry witch. After all, it does strike me as odd that she would let go the entire writing staff just after Christopher Tolkien passed away, and then Tom Shippey was suddenly removed from the project after voicing concerns for Tolkien's lore. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where I place the blame because the show still exists. A $1 billion failure that will serve as a harsh reminder that you cannot buy a fandom, nor can you buy a cultural phenomenon. Amazon are continuing to push out articles in the wake of the series attacking fans and promising the world for season 2. However, I think all the damage has already been done. Even if they manage to course correct the show, 2 years is a hell of a wait, and I doubt even half the audience will return for the next season. The magic and the intrigue are well and truly gone, and if you don't hook your audience in season 1, the art of diminishing returns will kill your series. Actually, the art of diminishing returns can kill your series regardless, even if you had an excellent season 1 but don't follow up season 2 with good writing. I'm looking at you, Westworld. In terms of the growing pop culture war that has claimed so many franchises, many of which are very close to my heart, I am proud to say that the Tolkien fandom fought and won on this particular hill. Like the armies of Mordor marching out of Mount Doom, Amazon seemingly had countless resources to crush any who stood in their way, but you didn't let them. All of you stood up, as one, regardless of race, colour or creed, despite your country of origin or the language that you speak. All of you stood up to be counted like members of the Fellowship, and standing before the massive army brought against you, you all uttered the same words for Tolkien. But remember, I'm just a brainless lump who considers himself a casual Lord of the Rings fan, but I was happy to stand beside you on this one. If you've liked what you've seen, consider adding a sub to the Sheltered Harbour, dropping a like or even a comment. Thank you for watching, or in the case of many of you I suspect, re-watching this re-uploaded video. 2 years after the initial upload, Amazon came for me. While I was willing to cop the demonetization piece while I was growing my channel, the manual review and subsequent partial block really didn't sit well with me at all. And here I'd planned to leave season 2 alone and let it drift by in silence. But Amazon is about to learn that I am a stubborn bastard, and I don't appreciate big corporations rolling into my sheltered harbour and making a mess. So congratulations, Amazon, I'm now coming for season 2. In the interim, I'll continue to throw my 2 cents or a dash of salt over anything I drift past. But for now, hooroo, my friend.